South African Laws by Lindsey. During the years of 1945 through 1994, the South African apartheid government enforced laws that violated human rights of the black South Africans. The South African apartheid government enforced land, labor, and power laws that negatively impacted the lives of the black South Africans. So, for my historical context, although the apartheid was put in place in 1948, segregation in South Africa has dated back since the early 1900s. In 1948, the Nationalist Party came into power, and their power lasted until 1994. Through that time period, there were many tyrannical leaders such as D.F. Malan, and continued by his successors J.G. Streetum, H.F. Verwoerd, and John Vorster. These tyrannical leaders enforced repressive laws such as the Groups Area Act of 1950, Abolition of Passes and Coordination of Documents Act of 1952, Separate Representation of the Voters Amendment Act of 1956, and many more. During this time period, black resistance was led by leaders such as Steve Biko, Desmond Tutu, and Nelson Mandela. So, land laws violating human rights. My topic sentence was from 1945 through 1994. Human rights were violated towards the black South African people who were forced to move into Bantustans due to the South African land laws proposed by the apartheid government. So, my evidence for the land laws. My first evidence was H.F. Verwoerd. In his statement, he comments, the policy of apartheid moves consistently in the direction of more and more separate development with the idea of total separation in all spheres. And this statement emphasizes that Prime Minister H.F. Verwoerd's vision of an all-white South Africa. The goal of the Prime Minister was to have complete segregation where the whites would not interact with the blacks unless it was job-related. His radical comments are highly offensive and shows the general mindset of what the apartheid government's ideas were. According to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, H.F. Verwoerd's comments is the violation of Article 13, Section 1, which states everyone has the right to freedom of movement and resistance with the borders of each state. His comment implies that he could move the black Africans elsewhere, but everyone has a right to move wherever they want to move without being forced. And so for my second evidence was, and whereas it is desirable for the welfare and progress of the said people to afford recognition to various national units and to provide for their gradual development within their own areas to self-governing units on the basis of Bantu systems of government. And this was a promotion of the Bantu Self-Governing Act of 1959. This evidence emphasizes the separation between the white and the black South Africans. The statement suggests that the black people would be better off living in their own homelands away from the whites. This is a violation of the UDHR's Article 13, Section 1, which states again, everyone has the right to freedom of movement and resistance within borders of each state. Again, this comment suggests that the Africans can live together, forced into these compacted Bantustans, while the whites live in lots of land that they own. And now for labor laws violating human rights. Throughout the second half of the 20th century, black South Africans worked in impoverished conditions, which is a violation to their human rights. So from our first evidence, before the boards began operation, if a man who was legally entitled to remain in Johannesburg tried to move to Rudenport, he would be endorsed out of Rudenport, but could merely accept this and resign himself to finding work in Johannesburg, where he had rights. Now, such a man will have to appeal to the Bantu Affairs Commissioner to be allowed to remain in the board area at all. It remains to be seen whether a large number of people will be affected by this. This report notes that the Bantu Affairs Administration Board has made it harder for black Africans to find work without all the hassle of going to the board and getting a path to work. In result, people cannot find as many jobs as the process of getting jobs is only getting harder. This is a violation of the UDHR's Article 23, Section 1, which states everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and to protection against unemployment. With the complication of finding jobs, the right to work is in jeopardy since the list of jobs are limited. And for my second evidence, no employee or other person shall instigate or take part in a strike, which was part of the Native Labor Settlement of Disputes Act of 1953. And this law requires people, specifically Black Africans, not to strike against work. This law was to limit people from assembling together and fighting for their rights. This law was directed at Black Africans due to them rightfully always complaining about wages and working conditions. This is also a violation of the UDHR's Article 20, Section 1, which states everyone has the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association. The labor law stating that no employee can strike violates a person's human rights. And next was power laws violating human rights. And my topic sentence was during the apartheid rule, Black South Africans were not properly represented in our apartheid government, which is a violation of their human rights. And for my evidence, having done its dirty deed and removed the colored voter, the Senate Act of 1960 restored the system proportional representation and the size of the Senate returned to normal. And this was a article of the Colored People Today back in 1976. This source explains that the power was not equal between Black and white South Africans. The Black Africans were not even allowed in the meeting room with other officials of government. They would have a representative who was usually white tell all the Black South Africans' needs. This is a violation of Article 21, Section 1, which states everyone has the right to take part in the government of his country directly or through freely chosen representatives. Mind you, these representatives of the Blacks were not chosen. They were given to them. So, if the majority of our citizens are a certain race and are not represented in government, it's a violation of their human rights. In conclusion, during the 50-year rule of apartheid, the South African apartheid government violated Black South Africans' people's rights. Ultimately, the apartheid government came to an end in 1994 with the democratic election of Nelson Mandela. Although apartheid has ended, there are lasting effects from both sides of the South African people. In the case of South Africa, human rights were not priority towards the Black South Africans due to the apartheid oppressive system. Thank you. And here's my works cited.